So which are the best weapons to use for Kinich? This video is going to be a weapons tier list for Kinich. We're going to be ranking all of the Claymores in the game based around which one of them are the best for him in the tier list. But before we start with that, if you're trying to get Kinich and some of his best weapons, the best way to get Primo Gems and Genesis Crystals for that is going to be throughout Lootbar GG. Lootbar is going to be a very safe and secure top-up website where you can buy different games currencies including Genshin Impact. If you want to buy from there, you'd want to click the link in the description. You go to the website, choose the game, for example Genshin Impact, and then choose an offer. For example, this offer here is going to cost me around $50 in the official game store. On Lootbar, it's going to cost me $43.23. That's around $7 or 15% saved. And with coupons, you can have even more discounts. With Lootbar, you can save up to 20% when buying your Genesis Crystals. But yeah, you just want to choose your offer, enter your user ID and region, make sure they're right. Click on top up now, enter your payment information, and then just click on proceed. After you do that, you just want to wait a couple minutes and then open up your game and the Genesis Crystals are going to be there. Those are some reviews from their website. They're very safe and secure. Use the link in the description to get your Genesis Crystals from Lootbar now. Alright, so back to the video. Before we start with this tier list, I'm gonna have to explain what he needs on a weapon, so we all understand based around what I'm gonna be making this tier list. So for Kinich, even though his kit might be a little bit complicated, or his teams and play styles and stuff like that, his weapons are actually kind of straightforward. Because in terms of like how you build him for damage and stuff like that, he's just like a normal DPS. He's gonna use attack, scale off with attack, and also crit, and that's it. All of the other burn and damage and teams and stuff like that doesn't really matter when it comes to actually building him. So when it comes to his best weapons, they're just gonna be mainly your normal DPS weapons. But to be more specific for his weapon requirements, I would say the most important thing is gonna be the base attack. He's gonna have super high multipliers and he's gonna take advantage out of the high base attack on weapons. So having a weapon with a decent base attack at least is gonna be pretty important. And then you wanna have the normal crit rate and crit damage. This is always good for any character who can crit, so yeah. Damage bonus is also gonna be pretty good, whether it's some Dendro damage bonus or elemental skill damage bonus, because this is gonna be like the source of most of your damage. Attack is also going to be pretty good, even though it's not really the thing you'd want to go for under weapon. A high base attack is good, but attack percentage as a substat is not really as important. You can probably get it from like other sources, but it's still not a bad stat in general. But yeah, in general, this is the order of the stats you want to look for on a weapon for Kinich. And knowing that, let's start off with a tier list. Alright, so starting off with the 3-star options, as I said before, you'll need a high base attack, so all of these are not really going to be pretty good. So we're just going to skim through them very quickly. First Shadow, D tier, defense, D tier, also D tier. Debate Club, it's a little bit of attack, but it's still not much, so I'll put it like C tier. And then Skyrider Greatsword is just going to be D tier too. Just a low base attack completely kills these weapons, so yeah. Yeah, moving on to the 4-star options. First of all, we have the Favonius. It's not really the weapon you'd want to use on Kinich. Some energy recharge is not going to be bad on him, but on your weapon, and especially without a passive, it's definitely a bad weapon for him. I would put it like D tier. The Bell, it's like the same thing, so it's also going like D tier. Sacrificial, it has somewhat of a high base attack, but energy recharge substat, and then it's just going to reset your elemental skill. It's probably not really the weapon you want to go for him. I'll put it as C tier. We've got the Royal Greatsword, kind of a high base attack for a 4-star, and then also attack as a substat. The passive is just completely useless, but just for the attack, I'll put it at B tier. Brain Slasher, just elemental mastery, probably D tier. Protep Arcake, pretty much the same thing as the Royal Greatsword, so I'd also put it at B tier. White Blind is just defense, so it's going D tier. Blacklift Slasher is a very special case all the time because it's gonna have decent base attack and then a crit damage substat, which is pretty good. The passive is also gonna give you attack, but you have to defeat an opponent, so it's gonna be pretty inconsistent, especially if there are just not many opponents on like the field, on like the abyss and stuff like that. If you only have 2 big opponents, so it's gonna be very inconsistent. If you have the full passive active, it can be up there at like A tier, but if the passive is not active, I'll put it more like B tier because it's very inconsistent. Serpent Spine is gonna have a crit rate substat, which is super good on Kinich. And then for every 4 seconds you're on the field, it's going to give you damage bonus. And as I said before, this is going to be pretty good on Kinich. The thing is that whenever you take damage, you're going to lose 1 stack. And to rebuild stacks, it's not going to be like a super easy thing to do. You're only going to gain 1 stack every 4 seconds. So it depends on whether really you're running a shielder or not. If you are running a shielder, this is going to be a very good weapon because it's just going to give you a huge amount of damage bonus, and then the crit rate is going to be pretty good. But if you are not running a shielder, this is going to be unplayable, especially like Persian teams and stuff like that. You're going to be taking damage, that's for sure. So yeah, it's also kind of inconsistent. It can be a very good weapon, but I'm not going to put at S tier just because you're going to need a shielder. So for that, I'll put it like high A tier, but it's definitely a very good weapon, especially with the refinements. It's going to be pretty good. But yeah, I think A tier is the right place. We've got the Lithic Blade. It's just attack and then more attack and crit rate from the passive, but it depends on whether you have leeway characters on your team. I don't know that. I mean, he can be played with leeway characters, mainly like Zhongli and Xiangling. That's what I can think of right now. So if you're playing them with those, you can have up to like 2 stacks, I guess. But again, it's very inconsistent. So I don't know. I just put at B tier. It's definitely usable, but how good it is just depends on like which team you're going to be playing them in. The Star Silver is going to have high base attack, but that's like about it. So I put it like C tier. The fish weapon is going to have a pretty low base attack, so it's not going to be as good, but it's going to have an attack substat and then some elemental burst damage bonus from the passive. Either way, it's not going to be super good. I put it like very high C tier. The Katsuragekuri is just energy recharge. It's going to give you some energy and elemental skill damage bonus from the passive, but that's about it. I wouldn't really say I'd want to use it either. I put it C tier too. We've got the Machaira Aquamarine. It's just elemental mastery and then attack. Either way, I'd say C tier too. Kumaru is just attack and then average base attack for a 4-star weapon. It's going to give you elemental burst damage bonus from the passive, but in general, it's kind of, I wouldn't really say you'd want to use it. I'll probably put it like very low B tier. It's usable, but there are better options. Forest Regalia is just energy recharge, kind of a high base attack too. The passive is like elemental mastery, pretty much that's it. So it's not really the weapon you want to use. And Kinich, I'll put it as C tier too. We've got the Male Flower, elemental mastery, and then it can increase your attack from the passive, but in general, it's kind of meh. I'll put it like very low B tier too, just because of the high base attack and then some attack from the passive. It's kind of decent, especially with the refinements. It's going to be pretty good, but in general, it's not the weapon you'd want to use. So I'd say very low B tier. We've got a Talking Stick, high base attack for a 4-star and then crit rate as a substat, which is pretty good. The passive that's going to increase your attack if you're affected by Pyro, and then it's going to give you damage bonus if you're affected by Hydro, Cryo, Electro, or Dendro. It can give you attack in my opinion because you can be affected by Pyro. Well, it depends on what team you're playing in again, but it's going to be almost impossible to be affected by like Hydro, Cryo, Electro, and stuff like that. So the damage bonus is not going to be always on the reach. So in general, I would assume it's just going to give you attack and crit rate, and then it's kind of a decent base attack. I put it low A tier. I think it's a pretty good weapon. We've got the Tidal Shadow, average base attack, and then attack as a substat too. And then when you're healed, your attack is going to be increased. Decent weapon too. It's a decent amount of attack. Obviously, you need to be healed for it to have any value. Otherwise, it's just the passive is going to be completely useless. So you need a healer on your team. But if you have that, which is not always impossible, I put it like high B tier in general. If you don't have a healer on the team, then just don't use this weapon. We've got the Ultimate Overload's Mega Magic Sword, just energy recharge, and then it's going to increase your attack pretty much from the passive. I don't even know how this works. I'd put a B tier just for the high base attack and then the attack increase. Like low B tier actually. Portable Power Saw, just HP and elemental mastery, probably like D tier. Fruitful Hook, high base attack and then attack as a substat, which is pretty good. Passive is kind of useless. It's just going to increase the crit rate of your plunge-in and normal attacks, but it's the same as like the Prototype rank core and stuff like that. So I'll put a B tier just for the attack and kind of the high base attack for a 4-star. We've got the Earth Shaker, high base attack for a 4-star again, same as the Fruitful Hook, but the passive is actually pretty good. When you trigger a pyro related reaction, which Kinich is supposed to be doing, your elemental skills damage is going to be increased. As I said before, this is going to be the source of most of your damage, so this is going to be pretty good. So yeah, it's a very good weapon on him. Free to play. I'd say this is probably the best free to play weapon you'd want to go for. It's a craftable, so I put it at A tier. I would say probably his best free to play weapon if you don't have the Battle Pass Serpent Spine. And I think R5 is going to be better like than the R1 Serpent Spine. R5 Serpent Spine is going to be better than R5 Earth Shaker, obviously. But if you have Serpent Spine like R1, I think it's worth it to use the Earth Shaker. Obviously, unless you just want the crit and stuff like that, then this is another story. We have the Skyward Pride, super high base attack, but it's just energy recharge as a substat. The passive is just some damage bonus, which is pretty good still, and then some extra damage from the rest of the passive. It's just the energy recharge substat. That's not really going to be a good thing on this weapon, but just for the super high base attack and the small damage bonus, I'd say it's going to be like still usable. So I'd say I put a B tier. Wolf's Gravestone is just attack, so it's just average like 5-star weapon attack, and then also an attack substat, and then more attack from the passive. So it's just huge amounts of attack. It's a good weapon, but I wouldn't really say it's like super special, so I wouldn't put it as S tier. It doesn't have any crit, and even the base attack and the attack is not really as much. It's not like super high. So I put it like very high A tier. I'd say this is probably the right place. Song of Broken Pines, is just like super high base attack, like very high, highest in the game. And then it's gonna give you pretty much some attack from the passive. That's all you need. In general, it's the same thing as the Skyward Pride. It's gonna have physical damage as a substat, which is gonna ruin this weapon for Kinich, but it's still kind of usable just for the high base attack. So I put it just above the Skyward Pride at B tier. We've got the Unforged. It's like the Wolf's Gravestone pretty much. It's just like attack and then more attack from the passive. That's pretty much it. So I put it right next to the Wolf's Gravestone really. If you're using a shielder, it's gonna be much better though, but in general, this is the play. So I'd also put it at A tier. But yeah, I'd heavily recommend using a shielder with this weapon. We've got the Red Horn, low base attack for a 5-star, but it's still pretty high, and then crit damage as a substat, and it's a huge crit damage substat. Passive is pretty much just useless. It's just gonna increase your defense and then normal and charge attacks damage, which are all useless for Kinich. So yeah, it's just like a stat stick pretty much. I put it like low A tier, just for the huge crit damage substat. It's gonna be pretty decent, but in general, it's nothing like special. We've got Beacon of the Reed Sea, average base attack for a 5-star, and then crit rate as a substat, which is pretty good. The passive is gonna increase your attack, and then if you take damage, your attack is gonna be increased even more. Whether you take damage or not is gonna depend whether you're playing a shielder or not, so you gotta take that in mind. But in general, it's a super good weapon. It's gonna give you crit rate, which is pretty good, and then also attack, which he needs. So I'd say it's a very good weapon. In my opinion, I would say it deserves S tier. We've got the Verdict, a high base attack, and then crit rate as a substat. It's like the same thing as Bacon, but it's just more base attack and less crit rate. It's also gonna increase your attack by 20%, just like that from the passive. And then it can increase your elemental skills damage by 18% if you gain a crystallized shard. But the thing is, you need to be gaining them like consistently, because every time you deal damage to your elemental skill, this effect is gonna be like consumed. But yeah, it can work, but you just gotta make sure you have a Geo on your team. If you're playing like Jean-Li, for example, it's gonna be pretty good, obviously. Or like with Kashina or Shiori team, whatever, but you just gotta make sure you have a good Geo player that can create crystallized shards for you. This is very important. If you do that, it's gonna be definitely an S tier weapon. Although I wouldn't really put it at S tier because this is not really like your usual type of team. Jean-Li is a yes, but this weapon is gonna be like tied into needing a Geo on the team for it to be like super good. So I just assume it's just gonna give you that crit rate and then attack. I'll put it a very high A tier, just because it's not like super stable. But if you're playing with a Geo, it can definitely be S tier. Finally, we have his signature weapon, Fang of the Mountain King. It's gonna give you the highest base attack in the game alongside the Song of Broken Pines and the Calamity Queller, I think. A very small crit rate substat, but it's still pretty decent. It's just whatever. And then the passive is pretty much just gonna increase your elemental skill and burst damage by up to 60% at refinement 1, which is pretty good. I might review this weapon later on like all of the characters, but for Kinich, it's gonna be super good. It's gonna be ahead of all the weapons, so it's definitely gonna be his best in the slot. It's S tier. It's the best weapon for it. But yeah, as you guys can see here, I would say it's kind of free to play friendly. I mean, if you have any 5-star weapons, generally they're gonna be good on him. Or if you have like Serpent Spine at decent refinements, it's also gonna be pretty good. If not, you can use just the free to play Earthshaker and it's gonna work fine. So I'd say it's decently free to play friendly. And yeah, tell me what weapons you're gonna be using on him. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video. Peace.